Alrighty, welcome back to the big show. I'm Jamel Hartman. It's the Daily Hour brought to you by the BAC Group of Companies, Medicals, Lenders, and People's Pharmacy. Don't forget to subscribe on our website. Follow us on all of our social media channels to stay up to date with all that we have going on. Help us grow beyond the mic as we do our part to continue to improve our community. Without further ado, let's bring in our guest for the day. You've heard his voice before and you've seen his face. We talk economics, we talk business, we talk jobs, we talk economy, and we're going to do some more of that today. Let's give a warm TDH welcome to Craig Simmons. Greetings, sir. Oh, yes, sir. Yeah, we've got a new one. We've got to get you the new one. We've got to get you the new one. They just showed up with a new one, and I kind of stole one. How are you?
Never been better.
Oh, it sounds like retirement talking. It looks good on you, sir. It looks good on you. Well, first off, thanks for coming. Always welcome. Obviously, we were preparing for a budget conversation, and then the budget's been pushed back, so hopefully we'll get you back around then. But a lot has happened over just the last week or two that we can't just wait to have a conversation, Mr. Simmons. I mean, we're talking Trump tariffs. We're talking about, insurance execs, giving opinions on CIT and AI and the like. And so, audience, if you have any questions or comments for Mr. Simmons, please feel free to ask away. I'll get through as many as possible. But let's start with the Trump tariff situation. Let's start there. We've spoken about it on this show. The premier seems relaxed. Bermudians, not so much. How do Bermuda and Bermudians prepare for the potential impact of Trump's tariffs?
Wow. You could have started with an easier question, Jamel. Tariffs. I think we're probably going to have to lean heavily on entrepreneurs to help us with this problem. Many of our goods, if you think about buses in Bermuda, the buses came from China. If the buses happen to go through the US, well, they'll be subject to tariffs. But if those buses were put on a ship and the ship went to Peru that has a new mega port, and then it moved from Peru through the Panama Canal up to Bermuda, Bermudians could avoid paying a tariff on a bus. The reason why I'm bringing this up, I think entrepreneurs they're pretty good at learning the rules really well and then figuring out a way to break them. I don't know if that's the reason why the premier is relaxed. Maybe he doesn't want to spread panic, but it is a serious situation. I mean, it's, the Trump administration is really bigger than tariffs on goods. We in Bermuda sell services. That's our #1 export. We just have to hope that the Trump administration doesn't decide to tax our #1 service, which is in fact reinsurance. Hopefully he sort of looks at his mansion in Florida and decides that if he wants, there's a pretty good chance that the reinsurance on that mansion was made in Hamilton, Bermuda. And so hopefully he'll be sort of selfish and say, well, I don't want to have to pay more insurance on my mansion. So these are uncertain times. And I suppose the best thing that we can do is remain flexible.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because some of the suggestions just recently were that Bermuda needs to develop relationships outside the U.S. Now, the U.S. is our biggest trading partner as far as everything, right? Imports, tourism, and the like. But how hard would it be for us to develop a relationship with the CARICOM countries, for instance, and Canada, which are, close enough per se, not the US, but should that be something of consideration? What are your thoughts on that regarding in response to tariffs?
Well, I would be highly surprised, shocked, if entrepreneurs haven't already started to think about that. I think most entrepreneurs, you're one, you have a plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. You've always got backups. You're always thinking about contingencies. That's the way you get paid.
Yeah.
Governments aren't so good. So it's, you can't expect a government to solve the problem.
Mhm.
We have these crazy people called entrepreneurs
Mhm.
that fixate themselves on a
Mhm.
really narrow problem,
Mhm.
and is good at these kinds of things. Entrepreneurs look at problems as opportunities.
Mhm.
So whilst the status quo, yes, may be relying on bringing stuff in from the US, you can bet your bottom dollar that there are entrepreneurs looking at alternatives, bringing stuff from the Caribbean. I mean, already Mexico has entered into major trading relationships with the European Union
Mhm.
because of what I'm going to call second order effects. So the first order is the imposition of these tariffs on the EU.
Mhm.
Well, you can expect the rest of the world to try and figure out the best way to deal with that. And arguably the best way to deal with it is for the rest of the world to develop
Mhm.
closer trading ties, whether it
Mhm.
be for services or whether it be for goods. So
Mhm.
this is what I expect to happen over the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. Um, we are in uncharted territory, but it is also a great opportunity for entrepreneurs to make an extra buck. And so
Indeed.
they will.
Audience, if you have any questions or comments, again, you can send them through and we'll get to as many as possible. Let's shift gears a bit. So one of the greatest concerns you heard from Bermudians over the last couple of years, not just leading up to an election or around an election, was the cost of living, the cost of goods in particular. What are your thoughts on the government's approach to ensure, based on the throne speech at least, it seems that they want to ensure that duty relief that they've given to grocers and wholesalers is passed on to consumers to reduce the cost of goods. What are your thoughts on that? Telling like private entities like you need
Yeah,
to.
I mean, information is good, but I think it's indicative of the problem that we in Bermuda face. Duty isn't the number one problem with respect to imports of food. It's the cost of food. I use the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization's food index as a proxy for where I think food prices are going to go. And right now in 2025, the trend is for food prices to continue to increase. Uh,
Mhm.
that's horrible news for us in Bermuda or a particular part. I mean, not everybody is affected by rising food prices the same. We have to be really, really clear about that.
Mhm.
Um, for those folks, poor people, and by poor, I mean someone making less than $1,000 a week, um, it's a nightmare.
Mhm.
Uh, it's a nightmare for a number of reasons, not just because of food, because these folks, you talked about saving for retirement. I did some calculations out of the household expenditure survey that was done, a long time ago.
Mhm.
And hopefully when the new one comes out, I can update those numbers. But using the figures from the household expenditure survey in 2013, the poor dissave. In other words, their spending is bigger than their income.
Mhm.
So the idea of saving for retirement, you know, it's just not on. And when food prices go up, you've got to find some creative way to get around it. And perhaps the most creative way to get around the problem of high food prices is to eat food that isn't healthy,
Mhm.
because the healthy stuff is really, really expensive. So, I mean, you have to sort of say, okay, government, you're doing the best that you can. They've tried lowering duties, and the duties for most food is at zero or very close to zero.
Mhm.
But again, and then you want to target grocery stores. You know, grocery stores are an easy target because they tend not to push back. But the margins in the grocery business are so narrow. Um, if you want to get rich, that's not the place to go. You need some serious expertise. I've had conversations with retired grocers, and it's arguably the toughest business to be in.
Mhm.
Uh, if you want to talk about a business that is not tough to be in, that we use all the time, that piece of plastic that you use to buy stuff, your debit card, that's the business to be in. Arguably, the markup is higher than the markup for cocaine, for most illegal substances. The markups are north of 70%. So every time you use that credit card, you are making Mrs. Visa and Mr. MasterCard richer and richer and richer. So if you want to, vilify someone, vilify the people, the card service people. Take it easy on the grocers. I mean, they are an easy target, and maybe that's why we go after them.
But I think it's conditioning, because I'm so happy you said that, because I've say it on this show. I probably said it yesterday. We were talking about something that the retailers are not the evil, I mean, retailers, period, but grocers especially. Like, oh, I know what it was. Someone mentioned the self-checkout at Linda's. And I said, well, Zach Munoz came on this show and actually addressed that, said, it's just an option for consumers. It's not eliminating jobs. I feel like in Bermuda, from a Bermuda context, that grocers and retailers have been very kind with that, because in the US, you go to a Target, there can be 20 registers and not one person working any of them. The only thing open, self-checkout, right? So grocers are actually doing people it's a community service at this point to keep people employed. And I don't think we realize that, because we have this sense of entitlement. But in you saying that, I said it, like, I don't know the grocery business, but it looks very hard to make money. Let's use produce, for instance. Produce has a very short shelf life. It's imported. How much money is lost when they're produce? Like, if we actually asked the numbers, we would probably realize. But again, we're conditioned. We're not thinking about Mr. MasterCard or Visa or the banks. We don't look at them as bad, because we look at them as satisfying our wants, not our needs. They're satisfying our materialism. They're satisfying our, oh, I can go on, get that new bathing suit, or go on this new trip, or so on. It's a conditioning, right?
Yeah. So you're touching one thing called food security. If you think about spending $100 on food, about 30 of those dollars worth of food is wasted. So about a third of produce, food in Bermuda, goes in the trash. So, I've been working on a food security sort of group, and we're trying to figure out how we can connect the food insecure, mostly people earning less than $1,000 a week, with produce that people like us scoff at. So the tomato might be a little soft, or the bananas may have too many spots on it, and so it ends up going in the trash. So what we're trying to do, and what folks like Amari Duncan are trying to do, God bless his soul, is to essentially use the food that is on island and get it to the people who need it. Because from a nutritional point of view, food is perfect. We just have these very high standards about what we expect from it. Now, this is easier said than done, because in Bermuda, we don't have a thing called a Good Samaritan law. So imagine grocery store A decides that it has some milk that is nearing expiration, and they want to get it to somebody who's making less than $1,000 a week. Because we don't have Good Samaritan laws in Bermuda, if that milk that is given to a needy household, it causes someone to get sick, that grocery store is now open to litigation. And so that's one of the reasons why grocers are a little shy about getting food that is, maybe not in the best of quality to people that need it. So part of the problem is institution. It's a legal situation. But these are the kinds of things that we can do, concrete things that we can do to help those folks in need. Looking at food security. Another part of it would be the fact that only about 350 acres of Bermuda's arable land is being used for farming, whilst there is like more than double that amount available. Can we figure out ways to get those additional 300 acres under tillage so that we can at least increase the supply of food? Having said that, it is not the solution, because growing food in Bermuda is expensive, because labor is very expensive. The seeds have to be imported. The fertilizer has to be imported. Folks like Chris Faria, again, bless his soul, have sort of launched programs with respect to backyard gardening. You know, anyone that's done their own backyard gardening, if they were to sort of carefully account for the time and the resources that they use to grow, say, spinach or carrots, they would discover that they're spending a heck of a lot of money in terms of their own labor. Now, you could say, well, my labor is free. Well, unfortunately, farmers don't have that luxury. But, you know, producing food, growing food in Bermuda is expensive. It is not the solution. What is the solution? It's a multi-pronged thing. Being more efficient with the food that comes in, reducing the waste, that 30% waste, getting it down as close as possible to zero, increasing the amount of land under tillage. It's a multi-pronged thing, and of course, the government reducing duties to zero. And even then, food prices globally, again, if you go to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, you will have a leading indicator of where food prices are going. And they are on the rise because of geopolitical tensions and bird flu. I mean, egg prices in the US, ridiculous. In the US, goes to say, when those eggs end up in Bermuda. So, entrepreneurs, God bless them, will be figuring out, well, do we bring eggs up from Dominican Republic? Do we bring them up from the Caribbean? So we've got a lot of work that needs to be done. Complaining is not going to do it. And so there are people, rest assured, there are folks out there silently working on this problem.
I didn't even consider that. We've been speaking about that on the show, and folks, I hope you got that. Growing our own food's expensive. It's not the solution. Yeah, I didn't consider everything you just said, and this is why these conversations are so important. Folks, keep your questions and comments coming. Trust me, we'll get to them. I want to shift gears to the, I don't want to say elephant in the room, but the big conversation regarding the economy seems to be the corporate income tax, and people believing that the government is banking on it. With all that's going on globally, some countries have decided not to go through with it. I believe Cayman and Bahamas in particular. But how do you see it working out for Bermuda and Bermudians?
I think it's interesting. At least the messages coming out of the premier's mouth have changed dramatically. We've had two throne speeches, one in October and then one just the other day. The one in October said that we would be able to pay off our national debt of $3.2 billion in 10 years. I found that absolutely shocking. I think that was based on the idea, again, coming out of the Premier and Finance Minister's mouth, that we would be able to collect about $750 million of corporate income tax annually. And on that basis, we could pay off our debt in 10 years. In the most recent throne speech, there's no mention of those kinds of things, of paying off the debt. There's talk about a sovereign wealth fund. But I think there's a realization that this is a moving target, and you cannot count your chickens before they are hatched. I believe the pre-budget statement talked about getting about $187.5 million from the corporate income tax. Again, we have to remember the Americans have not ratified the global minimum tax. They are not a part of this scheme. Why is that important? There is no easy way out And in fact, I'm sort of glad that there is no easy way out. We got ourselves into this mess, and it seems like, we're looking for some foreigner, because that's what the corporate income tax is. We don't have the courage to implement a profits tax, a corporate income tax on Bermuda companies, but we feel comfortable doing it on foreign companies, and that they'll get rid of our debt, the debt that we people created. And so there's something liberating for me about us suffering to pay off this debt, because I think if it's like if you got a son in university, and you send your son $10,000 for his education, and he decides to go off to Las Vegas and blow it all, and calls you up and says, "Well, Pops, I'm running short. Can you send me another $10,000?" Well, the answer to that question is hell no. You need to find a way to pay your way. And that's what I'm looking for with this tax reform commission, that we need to find a way to pay our way, and not sort of look for some tooth fairy to come down and magically make our problems go away. My fear is that if that were to happen in the near future, we would be right back here again with the same, if not bigger problem. Corporate income tax has got us sidestepping, as you say, the elephant in the room. Tax reform. We need to think seriously about tax reform. What would it look like? Why can't tax reform in Bermuda involve the taxation of local corporations, like banks and telecommunications companies, yes, grocery stores, but it's something that we feel is off limits. Why is it off limits? How about taxing services? Traditionally, taxing services. I'm going to get my hair done and my nails done this weekend. Well, it's not subject to tax. The nail polish, that would be subject to customs duties. But why not a general sales tax in Bermuda that would broaden the tax base, allow us to collect more money from Bermuda residents to help pay off our debt, rather than, again, relying on someone from Europe and someone to basically take care of our business. So corporate income tax, yeah, sure, but I think there's this over-reliance on it to solve our problems.
Yeah, I think the idea of taxes feels like political suicide to a political party. Like it's politics, right? If they were to mention, because for years Bermudians would say, "Oh, no tax in Bermuda," and they'll say it's included, right? It's already included. And the idea that, I've always believed from a tourism perspective, I believe there should have been a restaurant tax like Eating Out, to help generate revenue for an independent authority per se. There is certain taxes in hotel rooms and so taxes already exist in certain spaces. But I think the idea of taxes really scares people because of what they see in other places. Now, Bermuda already being expensive to most, having that additional tax. But I think what you're basically saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, is more of a luxury tax, right?
Yeah, I mean, let's get to the essentials. So the politicians have been saying, let's get rid of the sugar tax. Thinking, okay, and let's get rid of the duty on Belco fuel. I think these are knee-jerk reactions to a bigger problem. Granted, the sugar tax was implemented poorly. It was supposed the revenues from the sugar tax were supposed to go toward subsidizing healthy food. That didn't happen. It went into the consolidated fund, and probably most of it went into my salary. Bad thing. So that doesn't mean that the sugar tax should be eliminated. And the opposition party and even the government, they're entertaining this idea. Bad idea. Another bad idea. Eliminating the duty on fuel that goes into fueling Belco to produce our electricity. Bad idea. It works for the short term because you alleviate the pressure on poor families, but the longer term vision of sort of what's the term? The energy transition. the longer term energy transition to get us off of fossil fuels, to sort of onshore the production of electricity through wind and solar, so that we can in fact insulate ourselves from rising fossil fuel prices. If you lower the price of fuel, you lower the price of electricity. You make the companies and the households that are deciding, you know what, I'm going to put solar panels on my roof. I'm going to look at renewable energy as a way to move forward. You're essentially disincentivizing that effort, which to me doesn't make sense. It's again, politicians play the short game. They're not thinking 10 years down the road. If you think in the integrated resource plan, which was put together by, it was a democratic process with the business community, with the civic community, and it came up with a plan that would see Bermuda less reliant on fossil fuels and able to produce a lot more of its electricity in the interest of energy security. We just finished talking about food security. Well, there's also energy security. That would go a long way to making energy cheaper. Is it going to do it overnight? No, it's not. Most of the problems, the challenges that we face cannot be solved overnight. Now, unfortunately, there are these things called populist politicians who will play the short game and get you, or hoodwink you, quoting Malcolm X, hoodwink you into believing that there are short-term solutions. There are none. It's going to be painful. We just have to acknowledge and accept it. There is no quick way out, but we have to start. And what I see is just dragging our feet for one more year, dragging our feet. And the problem continues to get worse and worse.
We've got a few people in the audience. I guess they want clarification. Michelle White, she says, would this be a reversible sales tax to get us out of debt? We don't need more money taken from us. And then we have Traveling Trotty saying, would a service tax increase the cost of living? And I'll just add this to it so you can answer more than once. Charles Jefferson II says, if a sales tax was added, would Mr. Simmons recommend a way for those who earn a lower income to at least get a portion of that back?
Okay. So again, speaking to tax reform, you're looking at the tax burden that Bermudians will face. So one of the first things that has to happen, you need to get rid of customs duties. Why do we have customs duties? We have customs duties because it's easy for the government to collect the tax. Customs duties are arguably one of the most business unfriendly tax you could ever have. It's business unfriendly because you have to pay the tax before you sell the product. So if you're bringing in, let's say, pedal bikes, you got to pay the duty on the pedal bike before you sell the first pedal bike. Well, that just doesn't make business sense. And what happens if you don't sell the bikes? You still paid the tax. To my way of thinking, it would make far more sense to allow the entrepreneur to bring in the pedal bike and at the point of sale, then charge the tax.
That makes sense, sir. I get it. And I'm grateful for you explaining that. We've got another question. Shamari Sky says, should Bermuda look at buying land overseas, Canada, USA, UK, or giving loan guarantees to Bermudians living overseas to farm, similar to what China does?
Food security, yeah. Well, first up, Bermudians have already started. Bermudians own land around the world, whether they choose to farm it or put an apartment building on it or a house. Bermudians regularly save in excess of $3 billion a year, and 2 of those $3 billion go overseas to buy assets. Now, should the government be involved in buying land in some place like Dominican Republic or somewhere else in the Caribbean? No. I think that's something that an entrepreneur could look at. Yes, the Chinese have been doing it. It is one way, I suppose, of looking at food security. But with that comes the problem of security of land tenure in someone else's country. You know, Bermuda's legal structure has firm property rights. You know, if you own the property, it's yours. The government has to jump through a whole bunch of hoops to sort of take your property. In modern day Bermuda, it's happened in the past, but in modern day Bermuda, we would have to find a jurisdiction that respects property rights as we do before, I mean, an entrepreneur goes down to the Caribbean or some other place to buy land to farm. But that is one of the options I would think an entrepreneur, and I know of a couple of entrepreneurs who have done that kind of thing, purchased land in the Caribbean and bought the food up from the Caribbean to Bermuda. It is a business model. How successful it was, I don't know. The entrepreneur that did that has since which passed. But yeah, these are the kinds of things we need to be looking at in terms of our food security.
Thank you for that, sir. We've got Sean Smith's asking, what impact would moving solely to a GST system have on Bermuda?
Okay, so there is no single tax. We need to create like a portfolio approach. You don't want to rely too much on any single tax, which takes us really back to corporate income tax. When you think about it, if the Premier's estimate, it's interesting that he has an estimate, because I went to a forum back in December by the Tax Reform Commission, and the chairman of the Tax Reform Commission, Darren Johnson, said there is no one in Bermuda that knows what that number is, but yet the Premier has seen fit to throw out $750 million at being the number. But I digress. That $750 million corporate income tax, when you think about it as a proportion of the overall tax revenues, $750 million worth of corporate income tax, and if the tax target is about $1,200, $1,300 million, you're talking about putting all of your eggs in one basket. That would be a horrible, horrible place to put the people of Bermuda in. So what I see is a tax structure, a reformed tax structure, where no single tax has more than, say, maybe 30 or 40% of the total tax take. I mean, if you look at the present tax system with payroll taxes bring in, oh boy, it's about 500 million. Already that's close to 50%. So in many ways, we are overly reliant on payroll tax. But I understand why we're overly reliant on payroll tax. It's easy for the government to collect, just like customs duties. Remember, governments are lazy, just like me. I want to take the path of least resistance. Yeah? Having to work to collect your tax dollars is something that nobody wants to do. So a goods and services tax, no, we don't want to become overly reliant, but you want to sort of spread the sources, whether they be payroll, a general service tax, a land tax. You want to spread them evenly. Don't want to be overly reliant on anything. You know, unfortunately, in Bermuda, we're overly reliant on international business. And back in the 70s and 60s and 80s, we were overly reliant on tourism. We just keep going from post to pillar, relying too much on a single source of income, whether you be the government relying on customs duties, or whether you're the government, you're relying on payroll tax, or whether you're the government and you're relying on corporate income tax. It shows laziness. That's probably the best way to describe it. But having a tax structure, a portfolio approach, where, you know, 30 to 40% per tax spread over as many sources of tax as we can find is the way to go. That way, when one of those tax sources goes south, the whole tax structure doesn't go south. That's the basic idea behind diversification.
So wow, you're opening some eyes this morning, because Michelle White says, "Thanks for explaining." Does paint a different picture for sure. And again, I think when people hear tax, they think big bad wolf. But even over on Instagram, Mia Chambray said, "Point of sale, then charge the tax." I love this idea. And again, I think one of the things is we only complain about what we think we know. Sometimes. When we're having discussions and we find out that there are other ways or different options, it opens our minds up a bit more. So I'm thankful for that information. But with the current state we're in, what would you say the Bermudian people should be doing to secure themselves in an uncertain economy?
Save.
Mm,
Having said that, uh, the majority of Bermuda's population, you know, the data speak volumes. Since about 2005, the majority of Bermuda's population, I'm talking blue collar folks, have seen their salaries decline. You know, if you're in construction, if you're a farmer, you know, basically blue collar, the purchasing power of the income that you take home is buying fewer and fewer goods and services. That's just the reality since at least 2005. That's in spite of the fact that the economic pie has been growing. And so we have these two Bermudas,
mm,
one blue, one white. If you are a white collar worker working in international business, you've seen your salaries go up healthily and you're smiling all the way to the bank. You can complain about high food prices, but still, you know, you can buy yourself a case of Bordeaux wine. You can take multiple vacations a year. You're living well. But
mm,
that's the minority. The
mm,
majority of Bermudians do not see that,
mm,
in spite of the fact that the pie is getting bigger. So, you know, the elephant in the room is this thing called inequality. Um, it's something that a labor government doesn't like to admit. You know, the Progressive Labor Party. Now, to be fair, um, overly concerning yourself with the distribution of the pie, of how the pie should be sliced, can get you into trouble because you can disincentivize people who make the pie in the first place. But there has to be a balance. Um, so when it comes to inequality, there's two ways to tackle it. One would be, which is what the government has done, it has lowered the payroll tax for people earning under $96,000 a year. And they've been very clear and loud about that particular tactic. Yeah.
mm,
So, in other words, you've got poor people in your country and you're trying to target that particular group. Um, the other way is to sort of realize that you've got to give people the means to not be poor.
mm,
And the number one means to get people out of poverty is to target people at this sort of, pardon the term, the low socioeconomic people by giving them the connections that they need to move up the socioeconomic ladder.
mm,
One of those ways is through education. You need an educational system that gives people the ability to earn a decent living.
mm,
One of the things we're doing at Bermuda College is, in fact, connecting low socioeconomic people with high socioeconomic people through our Monday night course that sort of is free to all. Um, this thing called social capital is something
mm,
that we haven't spent a lot of time understanding, but it's back in a segregated Bermuda, arguably social capital, that connectivity between low socioeconomic folks and higher socioeconomic folks
mm,
was higher. If you were a doctor and you were Black, you were a member of a Black club.
mm,
Yeah. And so your working class people, a mason, unskilled labor, had connectivity to the doctor, a sort of A-rated mechanic. And so you had this transmission, you had the ability. If you think about parents of folks who have gone to college, and you've got a kid that's going to college, the kid who has parents that have been to college, who have applied for scholarships, is at a huge advantage over the kid who has got parents who don't know anything about applying for scholarship or applying for university or for internships. That's one of the things that we're again trying to do at college. We have this, one of the programs is this insurance-linked Bermuda College partnership, where we in fact take our students who for the most part are the first to go to college. They don't have parents who can advise them about applying for scholarships, applying for universities, applying for internships. And so what we're trying to do is to put our students in contact with people who are in the industry, who know about navigating the labyrinth of university applications, of navigating the labyrinth of scholarship applications. And another shout out for Bermuda College. It is arguably the most successful institution that has moved people, low socioeconomic status people, from that position into higher ranks for a minimal amount of money. Now you can say, well, I went off to Harvard. Well, Harvard and those Ivy Leagues are extremely expensive. They don't give you good value for money. A college like Bermuda College has done more, I say it again, than any institution in Bermuda to move people from their lowly socioeconomic status up the ladder. The numbers would make your eyes water. I think about the students that I have. Let's call some names. The present Minister of Economic Development, Bermuda College student. Gino Smith, he's now recently been appointed to the Bermuda Monetary Authority as one of their directors. The list is extremely long. And if you think about the return on investment, so you take cost, let's say, I don't know, $5,000 to put someone through a year's worth of community college. The return on investment is in the double digits. These are the things that will solve the problem. But again, it's not a quick fix. So the government gets more brownie points by lowering the duties on food or lowering the duties on fuel that makes electricity not so expensive. And we can sort of say, oh, they're doing something. But arguably, the horse has already left the stable at that point in time. We need to be proactive and understand that these policies are going to take at least a decade to bear fruit. If you put an avocado pear tree, a seed in the ground today, you're not going to get avocados tomorrow. You've got to wait. And in the interim, you've got to nurture. We have to think long term. Yes, offer these short-term breaks, but it is not the be-all and end-all. Connecting people from lower socioeconomic statuses with higher is arguably the most sensible way for us to proceed. So if you are one of these people that works in international business, it is incumbent on you to reach back and mentor some low socioeconomic person. When I at Bermuda College, then I meet young people, super smart, smarter than I could only dream of being as smart as most of these young people. And all what they really need is a hand up. They need a mentor. They need someone who's going to show them the ropes. But I have to say, we're not doing that. There are not enough people in our community who are reaching back to mentor young people. were too busy shopping in Paris,
Mm,
enjoying the good life.
mm,
But if you want to sustain that through the generations, it is incumbent on you people. That's right. I'm going to use that word, you people who are
mm,
doing well, you people who are north of $150,000 a year, households incomes in the $250,000, $500,000, to mentor people. If you're not mentoring, you're not doing enough.
mm,
And you really have no excuse. I tell my students all the time, when I come and knock on your door asking the favor,
mm,
there's only one response. It's
mm,
how much? Because I've had the benefit of sitting in a coffee house one day and a student come up and start a program. This ILS Bermuda College program is from
mm,
an ex-student who would put down $10,000 and say, this is for students to go to a conference, an insurance conference. That costs $1,000 a head. Reaching into his pocket and putting down tens of thousands of dollars a
mm.
year. Now, there are a lot of our people who TAWK. They just do that talking stuff, but they're really, really short on actions. I spend my time right now hanging around people who do,
Yeah.
folks who are going to help my students. And the talkers don't even speak to me. You can ignore me.
Talkers. Yeah. Yeah.
Talkers, yeah. We need people with action, folks who are actually going to mentor our students, who are
Yeah.
going to put money down for our students to go to conferences, to go off to university, because we have the resources in this blue versus white Bermuda.
Yeah.
Blue collar folks
Uh,
are suffering.
and I hope people understood. I hope you understand, because I remember leading up to the 2017 election, there was a lot of talk about the two Bermudas, and I think directly what we're saying is, yeah, there are two Bermudas. There's the white collar and blue collar. It's we've moved from the political race context of there being black and white. So I think I understood that correctly. Mr. Simmons, the budget is early May.
Mhm.
Can we get you on what you want, pre or post budget? We definitely want to have you on post this, because
Well,
break it down for us.
I am a retired person, and I am at your beck and call.
We
All I
appreciate
do is sort of sit here waiting for someone to sort of holler at me and say, "Hey, what's up? Can we go for lunch?"
we appreciate it, because the comments coming in today just emphasized the importance of why we created this show 5 years on. And Michelle White says right here, what I love about Mrs. Simmons, having Mrs. Simmons here, is to explain what leaders don't. They continue to speak at the high level when they admit that the majority are not at that level, continue to school us. But I think that's strategic, right? If you speak in a certain way and use certain language and people don't understand, they can't ask questions, right?
Well, here's another one for you before you kick me off your show. The contributory pension fund.
Mhm.
It's no secret that it's going to go belly up around 2040.
Mhm.
And again, I'm shouting out for Bermuda College. The course that I run on a Monday evening, the most recent evening, Monday just gone, we had Chantel Cardenas from Hanover Re.
Mhm.
And the topic was health, life, and annuities, pensions, how old people like myself are going to survive retirement. So the contributory pension fund came up, and she pointed us to the most recent actuarial study that the government has done. I think it was in 2020. So your listeners, the contributory pension fund, Google it. It'll take you to the government site, and you can look at the document that was done by actuaries.
Mhm.
So the problem with it going belly up by 2040, the big problem is that everybody pays about approximately $36 a month into this fund.
Mhm.
Well, how do you expect that fund to continue to survive if everybody is paying $36 a month. We have to be willing to put more into the pot, and it shouldn't be a fixed amount. So a blue collar worker should not be paying the same as a white collar worker. I'm going to put it out there. It should be like the payroll tax. It should be either proportional or progressive. As you make more and more, a bigger chunk should be coming out of your paycheck towards social insurance. That way, you could guarantee its sustainability indefinitely. It's not rocket science. And for the life of me, again, it's politically perhaps untenable to talk about increasing the social insurance contribution of people in Bermuda. They'll just sort of think of this as just government taking more money away from me. But no, we're talking about this situation with seniors. Seniors are both the richest people in Bermuda and the poorest people in Bermuda. And we've got to put our sort of heads together and figure out a way to target those at the bottom. And we've also got to find a way to sustain this contributory pension fund. The $36 a month for everybody is just ludicrous. Again, we need to have conversations with our politicians, let them know that we're not short-term thinkers, that we are thinking 10 and 20 years down the road. Because many of the problems that we have in Bermuda today are because of short-term thinking. See if we can sort of, change our ways.
He had a question. He said, I thought the government passed that law to move social insurance to a percentage base.
Haven't seen it yet. I don't know. Check your pay stubs at the end of this week, at the end of the month. But still just a flat rate.
Yeah, Mr. Simmons, Zena Trutt, I think she speaks for many in the audience. She'd like a pre and post budget thing. But one quick question about the budget before you head out. So the budget's usually presented February. At times, I think it's been pushed back to March. Obviously, there was an election. But outside of the election taking place, why else would the budget be taking place in May after the fiscal year has already begun? Do we know why? Is that a good sign or a bad sign?
I would not want to speculate. There's a word I want to throw out. Ultra-crepidarian. It's a wonderful word. Don't ask me to spell it.
I'm going on dictionary.com, sir.
Yes, ultra-crepidarian. Speaking outside your area of expertise. I don't want to do that. I'm not a sort of politically minded person. You found it? Ultra-crepidarian. So it's ultra, C-R-E-P, oh boy. I'm a horrible speller.
I found it. Ultra, C-R-E-P-I-D-A-R-I-A-N, noting or pertaining to a person who criticizes, judges, or gives advice outside their area of expertise. Thank you. Okay, got you. I'm sorry to go off track, but I've been telling people for years that I actually keep dictionary.com open from my days in radio, because I admit I am not the smartest, Bob in the chandelier. I'm not. So I do that. I'm just very public about it just now because I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who didn't understand it. But thank you, sir. Thank you. And it makes sense. And I appreciate your transparency and honesty with that, because it's easy to speculate and then that leads to one thing and one thing leads to another. So I appreciate that. But we have to get out and we're looking forward to having you back post and pre-budget to have discussions about the finances and the way we're going. So thank you. And cheers to you. Oh, one more quick thing. We did have a comment. It was, you were being recognized. Mr. Simmons, congratulations on your recent acknowledgement from Bermuda College as a distinguished employee. I look forward to celebrating you at the college gala on April 5th. Congratulations.
Okay. This is sort of like
news to you. Well, we're excited. We're celebrating you. We're going to celebrate you regardless. So yeah, congratulations and
oh,
forward.
I think the correct response is thank you.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Congrats to you. Congrats. But we'll definitely be in touch. Thank you for making time for us, and we'll chat to you soon.
All the best.
All right, Craig Simmons, folks. If you appreciated that conversation, do us a huge favor. Give us whatever platform you're on: Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, X, Instagram. Give us a like, a love, a follow. You want to share that conversation with as many people as possible. And the reason you want to share it with people is because a lot of the stuff, he was not here to be critical of government. He was here to really break things down and engage us on a level where we can all understand and educate us. I've said it to you for years. The businesses are not the big bad empire, the evils that we make them out to be. But let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll have a daily plate, and then I will leave you alone for the rest of the day. All right. So be back in a minute, 55 seconds. Stick with.